in one of the projects that we're doing.
Recording is on.
Okay. In one of the cases in Bangladesh, well, the Bangladesh meta model. I first would like to set a bit the scene. Huh? What are we doing in Bangladesh, and what is the Bangladesh meta model? Then I'd like to share a bit why we thought that using the MOTA framework could be beneficial here. How have we been doing it? What are the preliminary results? And what I find particularly interesting is the future. How can we use MOTA more in applied research and even in consultancy projects more? The Joint Cooperation Program and the Bangladesh meta model. I must say I'm missing Bangladesh a lot. I haven't been there in almost a year now, so I'm watching videos of how we are doing a lot of fun stuff in Bangladesh. So Shibli, I'm really missing you guys. The Joint Cooperation Program, Bangladesh, the Netherlands. It is a 4-year program for 80% subsidized by the Embassy of the Kingdom of the Netherlands in Dhaka, and a 20% owned contribution by 4 partner organizations, CGAS, IWM in Bangladesh, the WIR and Deltares in the Netherlands. And in this program, Deltares is the program manager and program leader. The goal here is to carry out long-term knowledge sharing and capacity building for particularly our Bangladeshi partners, but also for our Dutch partners. We also can learn a lot from what is happening in Bangladesh. I know from a fact and experience that Bangladesh is very far in, for example, climate modeling and climate scenarios, so we can also learn a lot there. The Joint Cooperation Program is running parallel to the implementation of the Bangladesh Delta Plan 2100, a very large plan that was formally accorded by the Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina in, I think, in 2019. So in that essence, that is the general framework that everything is happening in the for which everything that is related to the water sector is happening in Bangladesh. Yeah, so the long-term goal, we're not looking at only 4 years. We really want to have a good partnership and a long collaboration between both governments, the Netherlands and Bangladesh, looking at almost, more than 10 years, knowledge sharing, capacity building. For example, we have been doing a similar joint cooperation program in Indonesia, which is now in its 3rd stage, and although that is focusing a bit more on software and IWRM, we have seen that the benefits are clearly there for not only the Indonesian partners but also for us. Just a couple of steps back. In the Joint Cooperation Program, we have a number of projects in which all the partner organizations are participating. We have 5 smaller projects, and we have the Bangladesh meta model, which is the largest of the 6. The meta model is bringing together a lot of small models, complex models. I will not dive into the details of the complexity of the models because that is not the main essence here. I'll just give you a brief introduction of what the meta model is, what it does, and what the intended use is. The knowledge client here is the General Economics Division, the GED, under the Ministry of Water Resources. What we like to do with the meta model is to support GED in the planning of the many projects that are there in the Bangladesh Delta Plan. Couple of objectives: provide quantitative decision support system for investment planning. We'd like to provide a platform for GED and other ministries, agencies to submit projects. Support project definition, selection, implementation, evaluation, and most importantly, compare the impacts of potential projects on a set of indicator values. The meta model is currently in development. I think we are reaching the end of the development, but good to know it's an iterative process, so it can always be improved. Couple of boundaries here. It is a simplified simulation, so the model is uh, well, of course, a model doesn't or never gives the practical in how it is in practice. Huh? It's based on a couple of results of detailed sectoral models. So you can see, for example, the water balance model, a river network model, flood damages, and also related to agriculture. We are currently in the development or in the phase of a development of a small edition, which is focusing on sediment and mitigation, I think. Um, the idea is that it gives a short calculation time, covers a wide scope, but is less detailed and accuracy in the results, for example, in relation to more detailed models. And very important there, it's not a replacement for detailed models. Some screenshots of how the meta model is functioning. You can find these on the website, by the way. If necessary, I can share that link. The idea is that it's practical to use, easy to use, and everybody can play around with it. So, for example, you can see you can compare a lot of projects with each other. It gives you the project cost. It should give you some the implementation pathways, which were discussed elaborately in the previous presentation. So please feel free to have a look here. I'll share the link with you, or actually the link is on the screen. So we have the program manager, but we also have a dashboard in which you can see more detailed information on it. For example, indicators. For example, annual flood duration, extreme flood events in hectares, etc., etc. So the background is complex. The dashboard are easy to use. It's very easy to see what's happening in the background. But of course, it's still a model, yeah? and models should be used somewhere. It should have an effect somewhere, and often you see that uh, models are developed and they end up in a drawer somewhere and not being used anymore. Especially here, the Bangladesh Delta Plan is going to be the framework in the next at least 20-25 years to develop projects and to improve the situation in Bangladesh. Yeah? So it really provides decision support information to policymakers. It aims to streamline and provide better grounding for decision making. So better and timely information. So it requires trust, commitment, willingness, and motivation to be used. Jaap already indicated that trust and transparency are important aspects to consider, especially for such a model in which you try to bring a lot of elements together. It really requires trust in the results, but also trust in how it is developed. And so we are mostly focusing on the technical aspects of the model, but it's also important to focus a bit on the softer requirements and the softer elements in the future, for example. So the idea was, can we analyze these softer requirements and then act upon these needs and gaps, and therefore increase the success rate for implementation of the Bangladesh meta model, so that we are actually going to use this, and that the government of Bangladesh is actually going to use the model to make decisions or to support the decision-making process. And I was briefly introduced to the MOTA framework during my studies, and I thought, well, maybe that's good to use here, be it in a simplified version, but we can use it, for example, to map out these motivations, abilities, capacities of institutions that are actually going to use the model. So in that we could possibly adapt where adaptations are needed. You will see in one of the next slides that a lot of actors, a lot of organizations are planning to use the model, the meta model. So very much multi-actor oriented. It's very important to have these actors on board from the beginning on, emphasized a lot, I think, in the previous webinars and the previous presentations. engagement is of relevant actors is very important, and ideally from the start. So we would really like to know what are their needs, what are potential gaps that they see, and what is the future perspective of the meta model, because we really don't want to develop something that is that's not going to be used, because it does provide some interesting information and can really support your decision making system. What I would like to emphasize here is that of course these things you should do really at the beginning of when you're developing a model or software system. I'll come back to that in a bit. So how did we use it? Like I said, it's a very simplified version of the MOTA framework. We have not dived into the technical details of the framework itself. We are just using it as a complementary method to guide us in the process of trying to find out why organizations or why professionals are going to use the model. So we did start with a simple power interest influence matrix, which you can see in the screen. Some actors listed here, which is for now not really important. But the problem here is this matrix is very static. It gives you an overview of actors who have, well, low or high level of interest, high influence, but then what? The question is always then what? How do you act upon that? So we're looking for methods to dive deeper into understanding actors, and I think, and we at Deltaris think that this is the MOTA framework can really help here. Well, this is just a little bit of background on the motivation ability framework, very much introduced and elaborated upon in the previous webinar presentations. Well, motivation to act, perceived threats and opportunities, and ability to act. All very important in Delta planning and implementation, but also for example, a model or software systems. Successfully used in Vietnam, the Netherlands, and also in Bangladesh, in the latter stages for strategic Delta planning under the PDP. So that was also a reason to use it here. It's familiar to people, and I think Shibli has used it in a couple of projects now. So it's very familiar, and we thought, well, that's also a prey to use this framework. Like I said, I think it really gives give detailed insights into the background of actors. Why are you using something, or what is your status in implementation and planning? For that reason, we use this as a framework, as a guidance in a combination with interviews. We are still in the process of having these interviews. That's hence my my previous preliminary results remark. It really helps. I've now joined a couple of interviews online, and it really helps to dive deeper, to ask detailed questions compared to, for example, a simple questionnaire. So what we did, we designed our questionnaire really much based on the motivation and ability frameworks. We used a semi-structured approach where the elaboration of answers is really key for analysis in the future. And then, yeah, the script is just as a guidance. A couple of examples on the questions that we are asking based on the key elements of the MOTA frameworks. For example, for motivation, we are really interested in gathering background information on how our models now used for decision making. Are they actually used? So is there potential for the Bangladesh meta model to be used? Because it could very well be that decisions are being made based on other aspects or other decision-making processes. So helps with the success rate of using the meta model. Why would you use a meta, or why would why are you going to use it if you're going to use it? Is it because your manager says that you have to use it? Or is it just through your own interest? And for abilities, for example, it, like I said, it's a complex model, and Deltares and the WIR and CGIS AWM will not always be there to fill in the model. So eventually, other people have to use the model. So do you have the capabilities to use it? What would you need? Financial resources, technical resources, or for example, institutional resources. And where do you see bottlenecks, and how can we help to remove these bottlenecks? And then related to opportunities, what added benefits do you see of for the Bangladesh meta model? And given its boundaries, what other small models or submodels could we take into account here? And then finally, for threats, what are the shortcomings and how to tackle these shortcomings? So the questions are fairly simple, but as you can see, the motivation and ability framework, it really helps us and it provides a guidance to ask for more detailed questions and diving into the background. Preliminary results. Like I said, we are in the process of having interviews. I think our aim is to have 10 to 12 interviews. We have now had 5 to 6. COVID makes it really difficult to schedule these, and ideally I would like to have them really one-on-one to give people really the floor to elaborate on their answers. But in general, what we have learned now, motivation, for example, for motivations, it has generated some new insights, interest and questions. For example, why are we using a particular form of coding for the meta model, and could we not use other code languages which would make it easier for organizations to understand what's happening? So these can serve as follow-up actions and possibly included in the new iterations. For abilities, we see that, for example, there are really technical and managerial gaps here. This could be related to, for example, trade-offs. So really more decision support type of capabilities that people are lacking. So making trade-off between the results of the indicators, but also, for example, how is the model set up? So the real technical ability. So we really see that more capacity building is really required. For opportunities, like I said, we are now in the process of drafting small components for sediment and navigation. So that's also a result here of the questionnaire. Threats. Although the model is providing some good results, you can see that the complexity of the model, of this meta model, can be a real threat to be used, and of course availability of data. What are we going to use these results for? That is, I think, the more interesting questions. For further development of the model, but also for tailoring or capacity building programs in the future. We already know, for example, that we need to spend more time and more effort on providing capacity building in relation to, for example, use of scenarios and scenario modeling. So my last slide, and I think this is an important one, because in essence, we develop research, or we do research to be used in practice. What we really find is that the motivation and ability framework is a crucial addition to the more static stakeholder analysis type. So, for example, the power interest grid. Really like to encourage people within Deltares and our partner organizations to make use of these type of frameworks, and then for now the motivation and ability framework, and not only land with the power interest grid, because that's what are the follow-up options there. It helps us to better understand what the underlying goals and objectives are, and where we can provide recommendations, advice, and capacity building programs. I've only used it now, for example, in these type of projects, so large master planning projects. But there is also a possibility to use it in, for example, software development and other model development projects. And we have just recently got to know that we're going to do a project in South America, and we are also going to use the MOTA framework there and trying to increasingly include it in proposals and in projects to complement the stakeholder analysis parts to really understand what clients and actors want. That's it. I'm happy to answer questions if you if I can answer them, and I'm also happy to follow up on them.
Thank you very much, Nisha, for this interesting presentation. There's a couple of questions which mainly relate to the point that so now you have used MOTA not to, let's say, to design the plan and its DSS, but to evaluate how the decision support system, this meta model, can land, right? And so there's some questions from Leon, but also from Shibli. Just how do you see this also changing the meta model itself? Like how would the colleagues now respond to what is coming out of your interviews? And maybe can you already give some insight in what you think will come out? Did you already have some first feedback from the interviews on how the meta model itself maybe should be changed? And would there be scope to do so? And then the other question would be, is maybe this is interesting also, reflecting on your last statement that you're going to go to Latin America, are you also planning to use MOTA earlier, let's say, in the planning project? So not to land the decision support system, but to really to actually create it, to see what the plan should be and how the decision support system should look like.
Yeah. Thank you, Nora, for these questions. Two excellent questions. I think also two very relevant questions. The first one, I see it's from Shibli. Yeah, it was a real request from, for example, the embassy to ask us what is the motivation of people to use the meta model. So even though I can't give you real insights on what the preliminary results are, but I'm very much expecting that whatever comes out of it, we will have to make use of it, and we will to, for example, like I said, detail and tailor our capacity building approach, but also to address the high complexity of the meta model. For example, I attended an interview last week in which it was said that the meta model is extremely complex to use. So do we need to draft a document in which we really explain it, or do we need to reduce the complexity? So these are all questions that I will tailor back to the development team, and we will have to do something with it, because our aim is really to have this meta model be used for decision support and for the Bangladesh meta model. So definitely we will have to change if it's necessary to change. And the second question for South America, Latin America, yes, we're going to do a study for urban drainage and master planning in Suriname, and to detail the capacity needs or the needs of the relevant clients and the relevant authorities, and that's where we're going to use MOTA for, in addition to for example, a static stakeholder analysis. So more at the forefront. It's a pity that we didn't use the MOTA framework earlier in the development of the meta model, for example, but now we're indeed going to use it much more earlier in the process.
Okay, thank you very much, Nisha. So with that, I think we can move to the last part of the webinar of today, which is more like an open discussion, also thinking about MOTA in the future. And I think we heard quite some elements today, the role of a business, how we can improve monitoring and evaluation, and this last story about having MOTA used really in Latin America, which was also one of our points that we wanted to discuss. So, Leon, I hand over to you for this last part.
Yeah, thank you, Nora. And thank you all presenters for really nice presentations. I personally really enjoy these webinars because it really sets you thinking about MOTA, but also more about just our planning challenges in general, which I tend to enjoy a lot. Um, I also have learned in the past, what is it, 10 months or 9 months that we are now in this online world that it is important that we keep our meetings on time. So I don't want to propose that we continue beyond 12 minutes left. And thinking about what might be the best way to go forward, we have prepared a very short survey. Now our numbers are not that large, but still I think this very short survey might be the most efficient way to get a sort of democratic signal on some possible future steps that we have been thinking about. And then at least we have some good signal and we make good use of the um, 10 or so minutes. So if that is okay, and I don't see anyone shaking no vehemently, so I think we can do that. Then indeed, Jaap, I wanted to ask you if you could share your screen with the Mentimeter, and then if we all, I will, because of also the numbers are small, but I think our own um, opinion as let's say the core team initiating this webinar series is as important as the opinion of the other participants. So if we could all go to that website and fill in the code and answer the questions there. And the code is written on the slide that you can see. Yes, thank you, Nora. And then yeah, let's wait for everyone to get there. I think it is fully anonymous, right, Jaap? So, and I think we really value all the signals we can get here, and there will be no no consequences. You will not be, as a planner of the next phases of MOTA, you will not be held to account for the implementation, as Fee noticed. So, but it is good if we get some signal from the 13 people that we have here. And perhaps just starting up the Mentimeter is a bit more cumbersome than the next questions if we continue. So I propose we wait just a little bit longer for everyone to find the website, to log in, and to
Well,
cast their votes.
that's an interesting remark. Huh? Planner so far is not bearing any consequence of a bad implemented plan.
Yes, I like that observation from Fee very much, and I very much
But
agree with it, and think it is an interesting thing for for further reflection and see how we can, if that can be modified somehow.
yeah, and for example, I know that institutions like, for example, both ends and other NGOs are often fairly critical to, and especially Dutch knowledge. Um, so I don't know if I completely agree with that. With that,
Well, I think but that's a good thing for further discussion along with some of the other points that I noticed. I do think it's good also if the planners themselves are not just by outside NGOs or scientists held to account, but also sort of in an institutionalized way, and and perhaps from an inside perspective, which sometimes shows more complications than outsiders can see. Okay, I think we are not getting any more responses, but we do have a few more questions. So with the 9 people that managed to get to the Mentimeter, this is clear, and I hope it's clear also for everyone how to sign up. We will use I think Jaap mentioned more than 140 people that registered for the webinars. We will use those email addresses to get in touch with you on future steps. But for those future steps, let's go to the next Mentimeter question, Jaap. Oh, and by the way, Jaap, I hope that somehow you will also be able to capture and archive these results. Not that this is a very let's say accurate polling, but at least it's good to be able to go back to it later.
The answer is yes.
Yes, that's nice. Yeah.
And as you said, indeed, it's fully anonymous.
Yeah, that's also nice. Only Mentimeter might be able to know who voted what. I don't know what they do with the user data. But,
Of course, Big Brother is watching you.
yes.
So for this question, I'm actually not quite sure. I would want to answer more than one.
Okay.
But
Well, and I think the answers are anyway fairly mixed, so that sort of
yeah,
reflects also
represent.
perhaps your sentiment, Nora. Let's simply move on to the next question so that we get a good signal on our survey. So the next one is more on the kind of things we would want to do. And I actually also realized during the webinar that in our questions, I think we have about 7 or 8 questions that I think for our MOTA community, it is really critically important that we are not just involving the research community, but really also the planning professionals and the planning practice. So I hope that perhaps not in this research question, but in some other parts, there are also many people in those kind of sectors that will be interested to follow up with us. Okay, but I think here predominantly we have perhaps the researchers left in our meeting now, but it's good to see that there are actually also some people with ideas that we could follow up on together. Shall we move to the next question, Jaap? Oh, that's on trainings. And also here, perhaps you want to cross more than one, but I think you can select only one. Yeah.
I would really like my colleagues to participate.
Yeah, that's nice. So I think there is an easy low-hanging fruit we can collectively think about. I think the MOTA webinars were sort of an introductory training, but not very hands-on in how to actually do it. And so it's good to see that there is actually an interest to develop and contribute to it, but also people who would like to follow such a training or who think their colleagues would benefit from such a training. Yeah. Shall we go to the next one? Yeah, great. Yeah, and I think as researchers, we always like our core output is publications. That must have triggered this question a little bit in my thinking, but also to see, is this already next year a good period to initiate something, or would that perhaps be a bit too early? But I think the indication here is that 2021 might be a good year for thinking about articles or a book or a special issue or something like that on related to MOTA, perhaps as a follow-up also from the presentations we've heard in the webinar here. So that's also nice. Next question, do we have? Oh yeah, I think we have 2 more questions, right, Jaap? So this is the almost last question. Should we continue with these webinars on a monthly or perhaps bi-monthly? And I also noticed that our webinar live attendance has reduced a bit over the course of the 3 webinars. And for today, I'm also wondering if it is also perhaps because of the December period that we just planned it a bit too late in the year, or that the people who are really interested in MOTA are fewer than the 140 that registered for the webinars. But I think in this group, so of course there is a bias in the sample here because everyone is still here, but at least those 13, many would like to continue, perhaps broadening up a bit, and minimally to have perhaps one or two more meetings. The final question, I think, is an open question. If you have any ideas, yeah, then please type and submit. While you are doing that, let me just make a proposal on how to continue, because clearly with just taking this poll, we now have some good signals, and I think some good signal to continue this activity. I think Jaap and I, we might explore if we can make this poll available online, perhaps with the same questions, to get a bit more responses and to get a bit larger signal from the 140 people that we can now reach with an interest in MOTA. But then I think we will also, and perhaps the planning we will be doing with the core team that was planning this webinar, but I think the invitation will be open to all for a next meeting early in 2021 to have a little bit more time to discuss with each other. So perhaps like a 1 hour or 90 minutes meeting, no presentations, but more things we want to discuss for continuing with this international network and continuing to build and feed the network in 2021. And I think based on the survey results, we can think of some agenda items to discuss during that meeting. But I think it's also good for everyone to be aware that please also feel free to bring your own ideas and wishes to the table to such a meeting, so that once we extend the invitation to you all, also be aware that you are very welcome to add points to the agenda and to bring your own ideas or needs or wishes to that meeting, where we will then discuss with those interested to play an active role how we will continue with the different ideas that we have seen in the poll now and that will come up in the coming period. So I see also some good other ideas. Yeah, and some easy ideas and some real challenges, but I think there are lots of things here on the slide that Jaap is sharing from his screen. And I think, at least for me, indeed, the challenge with MOTA, but very worthwhile, is indeed to see how we can make it a standard or best practice for, I think, not just for project development, but for the whole cycle, as we also have been discussing based on Jaap's presentation today, not just planning, but also implementation and also afterwards the evaluation. So with that, let me close this final discussion session, but with the clear promise to be back to you early 2021 for follow-up activities and first a follow-up meeting. So Nora, I will hand over to you for the final wrap-up of the entire webinar session.
Okay, thank you, Leon. Well, I think I will just thank everyone for their presence, for staying with us in this 3rd webinar series, and of course, thanks to the speakers, to Professor Fee, and also with Juan, to Jaap and to Nisha for their presentations. I really enjoyed it. I think we make the best of this online environment, so that's great, and I really look forward to continuing the conversation with you in 2021. So that's it. Have a great day, everyone, and hope to see you soon.
Yeah.
Thank you, Nora.
Bye, and stay safe, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Stay safe,
Bye.
stay sane.
Thank you. Bye bye.